diving into the film, Vince, let's start off with the offense. When you dove into the film, you and I both spent a lot of time looking at the offensive line.
Yeah.
Give me some of your takeaways from the performance of the line.
I'll tell you what, I was actually, and I agreed with you with your initial assessment from yesterday about them being good in pass protection. I thought Jack Cohn had, for the most part, all the time in the world. And when things started to close up on him, he actually did a good job of escaping and not taking a sack. He got out, he got a 2-yard gain on what could have been a sack, and then he escaped to the right and got out of bounds on another one. So I believe there were no sacks in the game, no official sacks. So, but he had time. He was able to step up in the pocket. The pass blocking I thought was good. I was impressed. It has progressively gotten better. But to be honest with you, to me, with Coach Quinn, it should be getting better. We've never really had an overall issue with pass blocking for Notre Dame lines. At least that's been the best thing
until this season.
Right. So I would expect that.
The first few games.
But I would expect that part to get better because he's had good pass blocking lines in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the point I'm making. Run blocking, still hit or miss. I'm
nice.
I'm being somewhat kind. But when they hit, it's not bad. It's just there's too many misses. I
think, and it's something we kind of discussed beforehand, Vince. I think the bar has been set so low that
agreed.
The idea of hitting is different now than what it was last year or in previous years. In that there were times when the line, even like in 2019 when it wasn't a great offensive line, there were games like USC where they just came out and dominated and blew USC off the ball and ran for over 300 yards. And Tony Jones had a big night and it was great blocking as well as great running. Last night, to me, it's still just an example of the hits are simply they don't get beat, except for one exception. And there was one play that gave me hope that this line can, in fact, take that next step, and that was the 4th and 1 on the second drive of the game. It was the most, in my opinion, one of the 2 or 3 most physical runs we've seen all year. Physical blocking runs we've seen all year.
I would venture to use the D word. They were dominant on that play. On that play, they were dominant on that play.
Relative to what they've been.
Okay, fair enough.
Again, I think if we go back and look at go look at Kyron Williams' touchdown run against Clemson and there's different types of dominance. For this line, it was one of the more physical runs because you had nice kick out block by Kane Madden and Josh Lugg. You had a really nice block at the point of attack by Jared Patterson. He dominated on that rep, and then it allowed Kyron Williams to just kind of get through. I mean, it's one of the bigger holes you're going to see on a 4th and 1. And that was positive. And you could say, well, Virginia's D-line is not very good. They gave up over 200 yards a game, which was honestly my first reaction. But at the same time, you can't control that. That's not up. I'm not going to punish you because they suck if you do your job and do it well.
Right.
And they did that on that play. The problem is for too much of the night in the run game, there was just so much catching. And it just step and kind of catch. You step and you stalemate, step and stalemate. And the problem is in the first half, Virginia was flying off the ball. I mean, Virginia was competing up front, consistently beating them up. You had an outside zone on the first drive where Josh Lugg just gets beat outside and kind of turns, which made no sense on an outside zone play. Kane Madden gets beat. Yeah, it's strange.
On run plays. I really don't understand.
It forces an immediate cutback.
The tackles give ground on run plays all the time, and clearly that's a coach thing.
Well, I always lines I've been on, we always taught to give ground on an outside zone, but it's give ground at bucket step. You still keep your shoulders square as you work out. What the tackles are doing, and it's not just Josh Lugg, is they kind of turn at a 45-degree angle. Well, once you do that on an outside zone, I mean, you saw Chris Tyree, it was a jet sweep. Chris Tyree's trying to go. He has to stop and kind of cut back inside. Well, then Kane Madden got beat outside. We had another run on an inside zone. It was, I believe, to Kyron Williams on a 3rd and 2. And Joe Alt and Kevin Austin both just get beat up. Kevin Austin, Michael Mayer both get beat off the line. Kyron has to spin out. and get outside. It was I mean, it was just there was a lot of that last night.
Well, there were numerous occasions where Kyron Williams just made
Yeah.
plays. I mean, and Logan Diggs too, for that matter. I mean,
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah.
the Notre Dame backs again, and I will echo what we said last night. The Notre Dame backs make plays, and they are allowing the offensive line to be subpar. I mean, is that's a fair statement, right?
I think so. And for people that want to get mad and say, "Oh, we're being unfair," okay. So I want to give you a little stat from last night from the running backs. Okay, and here's an interesting thing. So Kyron Williams rushed for 70 yards. If you look at the Pro Football Focus numbers, and they're accurate, I went through and checked them. Of those 70 yards from Kyron Williams, 68 of them happened after contact. All but 2 of them happened after contact. Wow. Now, you have to consider that that's a little bit of a misleading number from the standpoint of if I believe if they're doing it the way that I believe they're doing it, they're counting it. If you have a 5-yard run, but you get hit 3 yards behind the line, that's 8 yards after contact.
8 yards after contact, sure.
So it's not like net, right? I mean, it's a little different, but it puts into perspective what I'm referring to. And of the 64 yards from Logan Diggs, 55 came after contact. And part of that is skewed because he had a nice jump cut at one point in time in the game where he ended up having one of his better gains and nobody touched him. But it was where they were kind of giving movement. But what I thought they did in the second and third quarter, better than they did in the first quarter, is they weren't getting beat off the line as much, meaning up the field off the line.
Right.
And that is when you started to see the run game get better and better and better. Sure. And it got back to the whole notion of, hey, when you just get a body on a body, you're going to be okay. But according to Pro Football Focus, and again, the one thing I think they do a good job of is data collection. And this is a data collection number. 199 of Notre Dame's 252 yards were after contact. Now, when you keep into consideration that 26, only 5 of Braden Lindsey's 31 yards were after contact. So there's a 53-yard difference. 26 of them came on a reverse. Right. So, it's just something to keep in mind. Pass pro wise, if you're looking to be critical, what I'd say is Virginia's not a very good pass rushing team.
Right, and we said that going into the game.
But they did exactly what you're supposed to do to a team that's not good rushing the quarterback. You gave your quarterback plenty of time to throw the ball.
Yep.
And
they
a couple
picked a few things up too. That there were times when Virginia was bringing some pressures that Notre Dame picked up.
Right.
I mean, there was one the one where Cone had to scramble for the 2 yards. Virginia actually brought 6, and Notre Dame had 5.
And the reason Notre Dame had 5 is because we talked about this last night. Chris Tyree was on a free release. Free release for a running back means I'm not blocking anybody. I'm just
correct.
So you brought more guys than you can handle. That is on the quarterback's got to know I got that guy.
Right. Exactly. So I mean, they bring 6, you got 5. I mean, there's only so much you're going to be able to do.
But in the past, they've done that before, and the problem is one of those 5 got free.
So there's 2 guys coming free.
Right. Last night, they got all the 5 they were supposed to account for. And the other thing I liked about what they did in Pass Pro last night is that was, I would argue this, Vince, and you tell me if you disagree with me, it was one of the more stout pass blocking performances I've seen, which was one of my concerns. Because even though Virginia's not a good pass blocking team, the thing that we did talk about that we're concerned about is Virginia's got big guys. Yeah. Are they going to get underneath the Notre Dame guys' pads and drive them into the backfield? I thought the tackles and the guards, especially, I thought this was probably Kane Madden's best pass blocking game of the season. His run blocking is still a hot mess for the most part, but this was his best pass pro game. This was, to me, Joe Alt was money. I thought he was just excellent on the backside. Josh Lugg was solid in pass pro. Jared Patterson was good in pass pro. Andrew Kristava got beat once up the field. Other than that, I thought he was pretty solid in pass pro. Got beat once and then kind of got beat late on another, but other than that, he was pretty good. And it allowed them to release their tight ends and their routes all night long. And that's the other thing that you have to consider is why is it important that the O-line be good in pass pro is because in the past, Notre Dame has felt the need to have to keep 6 and 7 guys into pass pro, meaning a back and a tight end or just a back or just a tight end. Last night was one of the most heavily involved game plans of 5 out. 5 out means every skill player that can run a route is running a route.
Yeah.
They did more of that last night than I thought they did when I was
They didn't
watching
keep a bunch of max protects and things like that.
There was one time, like I've said in the past, I feel like I can watch Notre Dame line up and say, okay, here's what's happening. Or at least I kind of know what that guy's going to do. There were times where they took Michael Mayer out in 11 personnel and put in George Takis. And I'm thinking, oh, they're doing that because they're going to have Michael Mayer, they're going to have Takis pass pro. They didn't.
Yeah.
They sent him out in a route. I was like, okay, all right. Like it was.
And we've been asking for that. I mean, that's
right. Now the ball never got to him because that's not where the read told him to go.
Correct.
Right? But I was as impressed by the pass blocking last night, not just the result, but how they got to that result. That they were physical against a team that is physical in their pass rush.
Right.
And Virginia threw some different looks well, not some different looks, but they did a lot more 4 down in the first half than we've seen, partly because Notre Dame wasn't spreading the field quite as much.
Right.
But Notre Dame was able to take advantage of that. Tommy Rees's game plan was allowed to take advantage of that because they said, okay, you're going to do 4 down, then we're going to do a lot of empty personnel. We're going to release guys because I think that our offensive line can block your guys. And I feel like as Tommy Rees has gotten more and more comfortable with the pass blocking, which again, first 5 games was like 2007 bad, right? Way better now. That's the one thing. And you can tell in Tommy Rees's play call, he called several play action shots last night. He was calling, more free 5 out stuff last night.
Which means there was more trust.
Of an offensive coordinator that has more faith that his offensive line can protect and that his quarterback knows what to do with the ball in the instances where they don't.
I actually thought, or I think I should say, that Jack Cohn is playing with more confidence the last 3 or 4 games than he has all season. Like you can tell he's starting to
trust. Since the Florida State game.
Yeah, right. Because he was here, like he felt like he was here against Florida State, and then it dipped hard. And he wasn't trusting his eyes. He wasn't trusting the line. He wasn't trusting really anything, it felt like, right? And that's why there was all the debate about, Cohn versus Pine versus Buckner, all these different things. I feel like his confidence level is high now. I think he trusts the guys in front of him enough that he's going to stand in there and he's going to make plays, right? There's people in the chat that are giving Cohn a hard time and that he's not good enough and all these different things. I think he's doing fine. Is he a 5-star quarterback who's just going to put the team on his shoulders? No, but I think we knew that coming in. He's going to distribute. He's going to get the ball to the people that need to get the ball. And I think he's doing a pretty darn good job of it. His completion percentage, his QB rating, all those things have been pretty darn good the last few games. So this offense is starting to take off, and it's partly because of the confidence of number 17, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. But I think it's they go together.
Sure,
right?
absolutely. 100%.
Things go together.
Yeah, no question.
And so, yeah, I did not love what I saw from the run blocking last night. It still has to get better. But again, when you can be ticked about the rush blocking and they still go for over 250, like that is a well-designed game.
Right.
And a line that for the most part just did what you're asking them to do. It's so obvious the way that Lance Taylor and Tommy Rees and Lance, I think especially, you can tell that they know. It's like this. Part of being a good coach is accepting who you are and coaching to that.
Correct.
And you see a lot of coaches that sit there and I see it on D1 every Saturday. D1 coach every Saturday. They keep trying to do stuff that their team just isn't good at doing. What we've seen from this Notre Dame coaching staff with Tommy Rees and from Lance Taylor is, look, our line's not going to turn into last year's group all of a sudden. It's not going to turn into what a lot of good running teams have. But what we can teach them to do is just get a body on a body. And if you go back and look at how they run the inside zone now compared to how they ran the inside zone a month ago or 2 months ago, It's a situation where they're telling him, hey, stay back, be patient, let the holes come, and then find a spot. And that's what they're doing. And it's coaching to who you are, not who you want to be. So those are the things that you look at and say, hey, that's good coaching. You're adapting.
Right.
You are, and then
Exactly.
Tommy Rees's game plans have been built to that reality. That's something you have to commend them for, and that's something we saw last night. Because if they're still teaching the inside zone the way good running teams teach the inside zone, it'd still look a lot like it did early in the year. They're just running in the back of dudes.
Yep.
That's good coaching. And that's something I noticed even more last night. Like, we've been seeing a lot of it, but I really started to it started to sink in last night to me that this is what they're doing. This is clearly what they're doing.
Right. No question about it. We have some super chats. You want to get to those right now? Get some of those put up?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to scroll back to the top. Here we go. AJ kicking it off. AJ, thank you very much for the super chat. And he did attach a question to it. He says, do you think Marcus Freeman will be a name to watch for the Washington job?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that if people are looking at coordinators, then yeah, his name should be involved. Now, is it realistic that he would go? No, I don't think it is. But if you're doing your due diligence as an athletic director, right, why would you not want to talk to Marcus Freeman? That would be my opinion on that.
This is what we're going to do, right? This is what's going to happen. And AJ, I get it. This is not a knock on you. This is an acceptance of reality. Every time a job comes open, we're going to get asked, do you think Marcus Freeman's going to take that job from now until he either leaves or becomes the head coach at Notre Dame?
Correct.
Okay. And they've had a lot of people asking, like, hey, did you guys drop a hint about who the next head coach is going to be? And I'm like, I didn't realize that was a secret. Like, I think a lot of us have felt for a while that Marcus Freeman was brought here with the thought of possibly being the next head coach.
Right.
So I didn't think that was necessarily like a
breaking news kind of thing.
Yeah. But I guess we said it with more certainty of the head next head. And so,
well, last night you used the words, I think the next head coach is on the staff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. But I kind of felt like that's a point we had already said. And it was Mark. Somebody asked me, do you think it's Tommy Rees? I'm like, what? No, it's Marcus Freeman. Like that's not a shot on Tommy Rees. It's like, but it's like, we've talked about this before. But anyway, back to the point. The point is, I don't know if Marcus Freeman's going to leave. I think Marcus Freeman has pretty much committed to Brian Kelly that he's going to be here at least 2 years. That's what I was told.
Right.
Unless the perfect job comes open, I don't think Ryan Day's leaving for the NFL.
Ohio State,
right? So, and I don't think Ohio State would go right to Marcus Freeman. I think there's some other coaches on staff who might have a crack at that, but I don't think he's just going to leave. I don't think. I mean, you look at his entire coaching career; it's been in the Midwest. And I don't think, because he's coached at Purdue. He's coached at Ohio State. I'm pulling up his resume now. Mm-hmm. He coached at Ohio State as a GA. He's coached at Kent State. It's in Ohio. Purdue, it's in Indiana. Cincinnati in Ohio. Notre Dame in Indiana.
Right.
And not wanting to go all the way to Louisiana was one of the because of his family and where his family is and his wife's family. Because him and his wife grew up in the same sort of somewhat area, right?
Weren't they? Isn't he from Chicago?
They're both from Ohio.
Ohio? Okay.
Yeah, he's from Dayton, and his wife, I believe, is from the Cleveland area. So that's not that far away.
Right.
So, they've got 6 kids. The family's able to be around. Both sides of the family able to be around. That's one of the factors that went into him not taking the LSU job. Sure. Well, Louisiana's a lot closer than Seattle. So that's one of the reasons I don't think he is. But look, I have no problem people asking this, but I just don't see Marcus Freeman taking any of the jobs that are open. Now, maybe he might consider Penn State if James Franklin leaves. I think that would be one he might consider. But I don't see Washington hiring a guy who's a defensive coordinator, never been a head coach, after they just fired a guy who was a defensive coordinator, haven't been head coach after 13 games. Now, his firing had more to do with what happened when he, hit a player last week and then shoved the player in the back. But if he was in his last 13 games, 11-2, he didn't get fired. They fired him because he's doing a terrible job. Right.
And then they had a cause.
Now they have cause now.
Right.
So anyway, that's kind of
Yep.
what I was gonna say. I did want to say one other thing about the
Oh,
offense before we move on to the super chats, because then
please
after the
do.
super chats, we're going to go to the defense.
Please do.
One thing I've noticed is they're getting super dependent on RPOs being outside cuts. And it's making it easier for teams to get their hands up and bat those down. It's also going to eventually result in somebody stepping in front of them. They've got to mix up their
Yeah.
RPOs with some ins, some glants, some slants, some things like that. They're going to have to start adding that a little bit to what they're doing so teams just aren't sitting on that stuff, and eventually it's gonna cost you. Just needs to be a little bit more creative with your RPO game.
When we were not an extensive RPO team, but when we were putting in RPOs as a high school team, it was those in cuts that we put in first because those are easier throws for my quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just So I'm throwing it back to you. Is that a normal progression, or does it just depend on what your offense looks like?
I think it depends on what you want
first?
and who you're trying to read off of. I mean, that's the other thing too is who are you reading?
Yeah.
If you're reading the safety, that may be a different thing than if you're reading an inside backer or an overhang guy. I mean, part of that is who you're reading. But I've always felt that RPOs need to be a mixture of both, because the problem that you can run into when your RPOs are too much in breaking is you run the risk of your quarterback reading this safety and locking in. So if I'm reading over here, right, and I got a guy coming from here, what I'm not seeing is that safety coming from over there.
Yeah.
So you've got to be careful there too. You can't be too dependent on one or the other. And part of it is just the game plan, who you're playing that week, how they're playing you. If they're constantly playing you inside out, then a lot of your stuff's going to be out breaking or stop routes. If they're playing you sort of off, or if they're playing you sort of on the outside, then you may do more in breaking stuff. But I think they need to develop more variety to what they do off the RPOs. That'd be something that I would like to see them add. But
Fair enough.
but that's sort of a criticism of what I felt was otherwise a really good game plan by Tom Maurice last night.